All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get to it. Welcome, class, to Classics 160 B1. And I'm going to say it softly this time. I think this might be what was messing up the sound. Meet the Ancients! Do let me know if the sound gets particularly soft again, and I will see what I can do about that. But hopefully that won't be the case. In case you were wondering, I'm your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we are going to be moving from kind of the first initial seeds of war between Greece and Persia into full-blown conflict. So let's go ahead and bring down the projector and turn down our lights, fire this thing up for lecture 6.2, Greece versus Persia. All right, so here's what we got today. A few announcements to begin with. We are going to recap what's going on with empires in the ancient Near East during the kind of lead up to the Persian Wars. And then we'll talk about what the precipitating events were, and then go through the actual battles, starting with marathon, right? From where we get our word and race, marathon, right? That's what it comes from. And then we will move in to a series of conflicts 10 years later that includes the Battle of Thermopylae, and the Battle of Salamis, and the Battle of Artemisian, and the Battle of Platia, and the Battle of Mycale. It is just full-blown war for like 2 full years. And we will see, spoiler alert, we will see that, unbelievably, Greece somehow comes out on top. So we'll talk a little bit about how that occurs. In terms of announcements, basic stuff today, guys. You know, put this thing in speaker view. You can see me. You can see the slides over here. And go ahead and direct any questions you have to your TAs. The research proposal is due this Friday, okay? Again, it doesn't have to be something super long, but the more work you put into this, the better it's going to be, all right? We'll do a short question and answer thing right after this slide. The other thing is, depending on how far we get with this lecture, well, you know what? I'll save that. I'll save that for the end of the lecture when we actually see how far we get. But let's talk about proposal stuff first. Any questions on your end? All right, so if you're looking to send a message to Blake, hang on. He usually gets here a little late on Wednesday because he has another class conflict prior to this, but he'll be here. When he does, Karen, go ahead and make him a co-host, and then you can contact him. Okay, let's see here. What else do we have? If I'm comparing Greek mythology, a show to Greek mythology, does the show count as one of my 4 sources? Sure, that can count as one of them, but it won't count as one of the ancient sources. Ancient Greek mystery is a good research topic. It sounds cool to me. I don't know much about like that kind of genre, but feel free to work with your TA and bounce some ideas off of them. Stuck trying to find a good topic. Again, when it comes to developing a good topic, a good way to do this is to think about how mythology, or about how the ancient world might intersect with something else that you already enjoy. So that could be an academic topic, right? It could be economics, or politics, or law, or medicine, or engineering, right? Something that you're studying here, psychology. And think about how that intersects with the ancient world. Or it could be something completely outside of academics, right? So it could be something like music, or fashion, or sports, or warfare, right? So any of those things are good. Good research tends to come from the intersection of 2 very different things. So that's how I would start thinking about it. Let's see, what else do we have? This is just a draft. Yep, this is a draft. You'll get graded on this. It's going to be worth 5% of your final grade. The weekly writing assignments are like 3% of your final grade. So it's really not much more than that. Struggling to find primary sources. Yep, you can definitely change sources after your proposal, but do look for good ones as you're going through this right now. If you're having questions on your specific topic, do try to touch base with your TA over the course of this lecture, or follow up with them afterwards, right? One thing I would say is that, like, if you got questions for them, get them in today, okay? This is a fairly large class. They're responsible for a lot of students each, and it's going to take some time for them to be able to respond to you. So don't wait until like Friday morning or like Thursday at midnight to shoot them an email and say, I don't have a topic. Okay, the earlier you can communicate, the better on that. All right, let's see, what else? Can we do a recap on how to find ancient sources? One of the things I'm going to do later today is try to find that list of source books. Again, what a source book is, it's a collection of ancient sources based on a theme. So I was responding to someone earlier and sending them a link to a source book on ancient Greek law, right? Which is just a compilation of all these ancient sources that we have that relate to ancient Greek law. But they have that for a lot of different topics, right? They have one for like religion and mythology. They have some for just kind of society and culture, that sort of thing. So I'm going to try to get those up on D2L, and when I do, I'll email out to the class. That'll be a useful way to go about doing it. Something like ancient.eu, that would be a good secondary source, or it can be a useful starting point as a secondary source, but it won't be a primary source. That's somebody modern recapping the past. Hesiod's Theogony, yep, that would totally count as a primary ancient source. That was written in around 700 BCE. Okay, so keep touching base with your TAs. I'm going to try to get those source books up, or the kind of information about them later today, and that'll give you a good jumping off point if you're still looking for ancient sources. Okay, let's go ahead. We got a lot to cover today, so I want to jump right into it. Let's go ahead and recap these ancient Near Eastern empires. We saw that we led into this with the story of democracy, right? And how it was this kind of weird love triangle type thing that ends in an assassination attempt of the last two tyrants in Athens. It's only mildly successful. And in the aftermath of that, it's Sparta who starts trying to influence and weasel their way in to Athens and try and gain a foothold. And what ends up happening with that are we get these kind of three players who are all jockeying for position. So Cleisthenes is one of the Alcmaeonidae, one of the Athenian citizens. He's kind of got support of the people. But we've got Asagoras, who's backed by the Spartan leader Cleomenes, and he's able to actually push Cleisthenes out of Athens, exile him. But Asagoras doesn't last long. He starts stealing all this land from the people, and as a result, the people eventually bring back Cleisthenes and kick out Asagoras, and it's Cleisthenes who institutes Greek democracy as we know it, okay? And the way that works is that we've got the citizen assembly made up of all male citizens, right? So there's still groups that are excluded here, but compared to other parts of like the Near Eastern world, it's still like a relatively greater level of equality than we've seen before. And the way that works is they vote on everything, right? If there's kind of one big takeaway that you remember about Greek democracy, it's that the big difference here, right, is that it's not about voting for representatives like we frequently do with American kind of democratic republicanism. Instead, people are voting directly on all the issues, right? That's how it works. Now, one of the other interesting aspects is we've got this Council of 500, and so 500 people are chosen each year from 10 different tribes, 50 people each, randomly. You can't say no, you have to do it. And if you're on that council, what your job is to set the agenda for things. And that sounds super boring, but it's not. It's incredibly important, right? Like, you get to decide whether the Athenians are going to like vote on going to war with Sparta, right? That's an incredibly powerful position. And then even more than that, within that group of 500, every day a new president is chosen to preside over the making of the agenda. And what that means, like somewhat wildly, is that like 75% of Athenian citizen men would have held this position of like president of the Council of 500 for one day in their lifetime, which is just kind of crazy thinking about how, like, you know, how few people, over the several hundred years we've had America, right? We've had 40-something presidents. It was a new one every day in ancient Athens. Okay, but Sparta has not given up hope of kind of weaseling their way into Athens to gain power here, and they're rallying the Peloponnesian League to make inroads into Attica and try to really take the war to Athens. But it all falls apart at the end, but not before it does some lasting damage. Athens gets scared and they send envoys east into the Persian Empire to ask for help and defense against the Peloponnesian League. And the Persians ask for this gift of earth and water. And what ends up happening, right, from the Persian perspective is that Athens has submitted to Persian rule, even though from the Athenian perspective, that's not what's happened at all. And it doesn't really matter that Persia never actually sends any help. Like, they don't actually do anything to help Athens. From the Persian perspective, like, it's a done deal. So, what we did, right, was we started to look at, well, where in the world did Persia actually come from, right? And so we can see here that this is ancient Greece at this point in time, right around 500 BCE. And this is the Persian Empire. I mean, we are just talking about things on a wildly different scale. So how do we get there, right? Well, one of the things that we saw was that there's a continual turnover in terms of empires in that kind of Near Eastern region. So after the Bronze Age collapse, we first get the Assyrians, right? We saw their development of siege engines, and then we see their terror tactics, right? Impaling people, flaying them alive, as a way to basically disincentivize people from putting up a fight at all, right? It's just easier if you just say, all right, whatever, we surrender. But the Assyrians don't stay in power forever, right? Along the same time that they're over here in the kind of Mesopotamian region, we get the Phrygians over in Anatolia, central Anatolia, modern day Turkey. And the big Phrygian guy to remember was like the real King Midas. There actually is a King Midas whose name would have pronounced something like Mita in ancient Phrygian. And we've excavated his tomb in the 20th century, which is just one of those things that I remember when I first learned about that. I was like, that's awesome. That is so cool. How do we have the tomb of King Midas? And if we look further west, right, even closer to what's going on in Greece, we get the Lydian kingdom here. And the guy to remember from the Lydian kingdom is this guy Croesus, who grows incredibly wealthy by taxing the Ionian city-states, right? So just kind of keep in perspective here that what we have when we get over there is over here, right? These are Greek city-states, and they butt right up against the Lydian kingdom. And as this grows in power, they start being able to extract money and taxes from those city-states. And that's going to cause big problems later on. Okay, so eventually the Assyrians fall. And the group that takes over are the Medes, or the Median Empire. And we finished with the story of last time of Astyages and Harpagus, right? So Astyages was the king of the Medes, and he has this terrible dream. And as a way to prevent this dream from coming true, right, from his daughter's offspring kind of overthrowing him, he sends his daughter away into this little kind of like backwater area of the empire, right? So the main empire is centered up here. He sends his daughter all the way down here. But his daughter marries a local farmer and gives birth, and this kid starts growing up. And when he's playing with other kids, somehow he's got this kind of regal royal sense to him already. And word gets back to Astyages, who sends Harpagus to go kill him. But Harpagus is like, I can't kill like the grandson of the king, right? And the son of the daughter of the king. Because like, what if she takes over, right? He would not be in a good position. So he lets him live and he goes back. But eventually Astyages hears that his son has not been killed and Harpagus has not followed through with what he was ordered to do. And then he feeds Harpagus his own sons baked into a pie. But then Astyages makes a terrible mistake. When this kid, a kid by the name of Cyrus, starts to grow older and starts to build an army to go against his grandfather, Astyages sends Harpagus at the head of his own army to fight him. Which obviously, when he gets there, Astyages just teams up with Cyrus, and then Harpagus teams up with Cyrus, and then they both go against Cyrus's grandfather, Astyages, okay? And that's not a particularly hard-fought battle. Cyrus is able to win, and in that victory, he's basically able to gain all this land, right? One single victory of Cyrus and the Persians over the Median Empire, and they're able to take over the entire previous empire. So that's kind of one of the things when the reason you get this kind of exchange of empires is that when you control such a large land and you fight these huge battles, one single battle, right? One single victory or one single loss can transfer power between massive areas, right? Massive geographical extents. Okay, so what Cyrus ends up doing then, he starts with this area in orange over here, right? And what he ends up doing from there is he first moves west against the Lydian Empire, right? The Lydian kingdom, which was ruled at the time by that guy Croesus, right? The dude known for being fabulously wealthy. And Croesus starts thinking, he's like, I don't know, should I go to battle against Cyrus and the Persians? And what he does, he's heard of the oracle. He's heard of the oracle at Delphi. And so he goes there and he asks the oracle, right? Should I go to battle with Cyrus and the Persians? And the oracle gives one of its most famous prophecies of all time. What it says to Cyrus is that if you go to battle, a great empire will fall. And so Croesus leaves there and he's all excited, right? He's like, the oracle has given me positive news that if I go to battle with Cyrus, I will defeat the Persian Empire and I will be the new leader of the greatest empire the world has ever seen. But the oracle is known for being a little tricky with its wording. And what ends up happening is that when he goes to battle with the Persians, he himself is soundly defeated. And then the oracle, of course, is proven true because the great empire did fall. It just happened to be his own Lydian Empire. So at this point in time, Cyrus owns this area over here of Media. He owns the area of Lydia. And next up, he's going against the Babylonians. And so he starts to move south here into the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys. And eventually in 539, he's able to conquer the city of Babylon. The city of Babylon's a big deal at this time, and one of the super cool things about this conquest is that we have the description of the conquest from both sides. So we get a Babylonian version of this, and we get a Persian version of this. And according to the Babylonian version, the story that we get is that Cyrus had so much manpower that he was actually able to divert the river that runs through Babylon. And when he was able to divert that river, the little gates underneath the river, he was able to go under those into the city, and that's how he entered. Now the Persian version, right, the way that they see it is they say that the Babylonians, they had this coming, right? They had treated the gods poorly. And because of that, the gods were angry with them. And so they basically deserved the fact that the Persians came in and took over the Babylonians. So at this point in time, the Persians have now got the Median Empire, they've got the Lydian Empire, they've got the Babylonian Empire, and now they're moving into Egypt. Now it happens that this isn't going to be Cyrus anymore. Cyrus dies. We also have the tomb of Cyrus, which is super cool. But Cyrus dies, and it's his son Cambyses who makes his way into Egypt. Now, Cambyses is a character. This guy's wild, okay? So he's heard these myths and stories that the Egyptians worship cats. And so what he does is he makes his whole army carry cats in front of their army as a shield to get the Egyptians not to attack because they think the cats are sacred. Then he starts launching the cats over the walls as well, as a way to like terrify the Egyptians that the gods are attacking. And according to some of the sources, it kind of sort of works. But Cambyses goes on from there just to even act crazier and crazier. He stabs the sacred bull, the Apis bull of Egypt. He marries his sister according to ancient Egyptian practice, and then he kills her. Any nobles that go against Cambyses, he buries them alive. So Cambyses already, if you've ever heard that phrase, kind of absolute power corrupts absolutely, Cambyses is a very good example of that. One of the interesting things is those stories tend to come from the Greek historian Herodotus, right? So it's a Greek historian writing about a Persian ruler in Egypt. But we also have some Egyptian texts as well that also detail what Cambyses was doing when he was in Egypt. And the Egyptian texts say he was like a pretty normal ruler, right? That he like portrayed himself like a pharaoh, that he kind of ruled normally. So a really interesting kind of juxtaposition between the two different stories about how he ruled. From the Greek perspective, he was a monster in Egypt. From the Egyptian perspective, at least the few noble texts that we have about him, he seems to have kind of sort of ruled like a traditional Egyptian pharaoh. Now, one of the things that happens is at the end of when Cambyses is in Egypt, he learns of a revolt back in the homeland. And the story goes that he jumps on his horse, and accidentally when he jumps on his horse, he stabs himself in the femoral artery, in the leg, and then he bleeds to death. So we don't know whether there was actually some sort of revolt, but we think there actually was, and that the winner of the kind of chaos going on in the capital is this guy Darius. And this is going to be the guy who first comes into contact with the Greeks. So what we're looking at here is a inscription. It's built high up on a cliffside at the site of Behistun. And this is a super important inscription for us because it's kind of like the cuneiform version of the Rosetta Stone. It's 3 different languages, all saying the same thing, right? I forget what the languages actually are. I think it's like Old Persian, it's like Elamite, and one other one. I forget what the third one is. But that allows us to translate some of the other languages there. But he's putting this up as a kind of propaganda saying that he's the rightful ruler. And when you have to do that, it usually means you're not the rightful ruler. So we kind of think that Darius was the guy who came out on top from whatever coup was going on. Okay, so Darius is now in control, right? Crazy Cambyses is out. And Darius starts pushing westward, right? If we go back to the maps, right? Remember now Persia owns all the way out here. Persia's bumping up against these Greek city-states here. And so Darius keeps pushing westward into the Aegean, and now we start to get conflict between the Greeks and the Persians. So let's see what that conflict is all about. So this all began, remember that guy Croesus, the leader of the Lydians? It all begins with him taxing the Greek city-states very heavily. And when the Persians take over, they keep that taxation up. And so those Ionian city-states, the city-states in the kind of west coast of modern-day Turkey, they're getting really, really sick of having to pay these exorbitant taxes to these outside empires. And in 494, we get a series of city-states rebel and revolt. And it's actually a pretty successful revolt. They're able to take the local capital of the kind of province out there and burn the capital to the ground. So it's a relatively successful revolt in the very, very short term. In the long term, bad things, man. Bad things happen. So the Persian Empire brings like the weight of the empire behind them and starts burning city-states all up and down the west coast of Turkey. All these Greek city-states are being burnt. When you look at them archaeologically, you can see the destruction layers right at the beginning of the 5th century BC. Now, once they're done burning the city-states of Ionia, right, the west coast of modern-day Turkey, Persia decides it's not stopping there. They'd heard stories that the Athenians, right, and that the kind of mainland Greek city-states had been supporting these Ionian city-states in their revolt. And so Persia uses this as an excuse to start moving westward, continuing westward across the Aegean into Greece. Now, in 492, right, so another year or two later, they get into mainland Greece and they're sending heralds out there. And they're asking now for submission, right? They're saying, you gave the earth and water earlier, I want you to do that again. Athens does not take kindly to this. Athens kills the guy, right? They say, don't kill the messenger. Athens kills the messenger, beheads him. Sparta, right, that famous phrase from the 300, right, says, basically, if you want earth and water, come and get it, right? And so the Greeks do not take kindly to this asking of submission by Persia. And so Persia basically says, okay, we will come and get it. And they start sending a fleet westward, right, across the Aegean. They're burning all these city-states that exist on the islands along the way. And then in 490, right, in 490 BC, the Persians land on Athenian shores, right? So Athens is a little bit inland. It's about 10 miles inland from its nearest port. And if you come straight west and you hit the kind of the side of the Attica Peninsula, it's about 26.2 miles away from Athens. And it's called the Bay of Marathon. And where they land is at Marathon. So Persia's got about 30,000 troops there, and they are ready to teach the Greeks a lesson about submitting when you're supposed to submit. So this leads us to the Battle of Marathon. This is the first kind of real, we saw the revolt, the Ionian revolt earlier, but this is the first real battle between a Greek army and a Persian army. And as you guys might have guessed, right, the Battle of Marathon is where we get our term marathon from, right? And it's from this guy, Phidippides, right? Say that 3 times fast, Phidippides. Now, you've heard that he runs 26.2 miles, and that's where we get our distance for a marathon. And that's only kind of true. Phidippides actually runs much, much farther. Before he ever goes to Marathon, Athens starts freaking out. They hear like the ships are on their way, and they send this poor guy running from Athens all the way to Sparta to ask for help against the Persians. So we get our guy Phidippides up here, right? And Athens on the Attica Peninsula, way up here, right? And over the course of some amount of time, he runs all the way down to Sparta and then all the way back to Athens. It's a really long way. And what happens when he gets to Sparta? He says, look, the Persians are coming for us. We need help. And Sparta, right? The warlike, militaristic Spartans, they say, ooh, well, the omens are unclear right now. Could you come back in a few days? Can you imagine running all the way to Sparta and then being told to come back in a few days? Also when the Persian fleet is ready to attack you. So Phidippides is like, all right, whatever. I'm out of here. Sparta is not helping. So the Athenians then, right? They've heard about the Persians. They've seen the destruction that the Persians have wrought on the Ionian city-states and on those city-states in the Greek islands. And so they are not even totally sure they want to fight this fight. And it's their general, a guy by the name of Miltiades, who leads 9,000 troops to the site of Marathon, okay? So it's Miltiades taking people to Marathon. They have a vote in Athens, and the vote actually turns out just barely in favor of putting up a fight. Now he's only able to get about 9,000 Athenians, and this is against 30,000 Persians. So the numbers are not in their favor. So, our guy Phidippides again, he's now got to run from Athens to get out to Marathon to let Miltiades know that, hey, there's no help coming from Sparta. And the battle takes place, right? The Battle of Marathon. And the Athenians are able to put up a fight using their phalanx style of warfare against the 30,000 Persians and push them back, right? They soundly defeat the Persians. And what's amazing here is this is the first time ever this has happened. We just saw the Persians, right? They took the Lydian Empire. They took the Median Empire. They took the Babylonian Empire. They took the Egyptian Empire. This is the first time somebody has put up a real solid fight against the Persians and actually won. And moreover, it's not even an empire. It's like a little piddly city-state of Athens right here. Now, it's not like Athens defeated all of Persia. The Persian Empire doesn't fall here, but they win the battle. And this is where the actual run of Phidippides, the one that he's known for, is this final run from the site of Marathon here. This is the Bay of Marathon, back to the city of Athens. And you can kind of see the city center right in here. And he's got to do that because there are people in Athens ready to betray the city to the Persians, right? So the fleet was defeated, but the rest of the fleet, the ones that didn't land here, are now sailing around the Attica Peninsula, all right, and trying to land over here at the port of Piraeus. And there are some people in Athens who are ready to betray the city. So Phidippides has got to get there and say, hey, we won. Don't do this. Like, we won the battle. Don't let the bad guys in. And so he runs through the city here, right? And he's running as fast as he can, and he runs up the Acropolis, up the side, and he delivers the news that the Athenians beat the Persians at Marathon, and that they should not let the Persians in. And then after delivering that news, he collapses and dies after running like 350 miles in a week. But the message was conveyed, and the Greeks do not betray the city to the Persians. Okay, so in the aftermath of this, Darius is furious, right? He's furious that somebody put up a fight and actually won. And so he starts raising a huge army, but he dies before he's ever able to kind of use it against the Greeks. So he dies like 4 years later before he's ever really able to make the big push, the big invasion into Greece. And his successor is a guy by the name of Xerxes, and he's just got bigger problems to deal with to begin. Okay, so to begin, Egypt is revolting, so he's got to go down there and deal with that. He wasn't really a part of the whole Greek invasion earlier, so he's just not as motivated. But over time, that motivation starts to change a little bit. So let's go ahead. I would like to take a minute or two to do attendance right now. Go ahead and get onto D2L and put in Poipel as your answer for today. So I got a question in here about the movie 300. So it's actually not about the Battle of Marathon. That's a different battle, but we're going to hear about that in the end of today's lecture.
That's correct. The second movie, it is about the Marathon Battle, because remember that there are two movies?
Oh, I never saw the second one.
Yeah, the Rise of the Empire. So maybe you should take one day to see it, because it is about, well, aside of all the fictional stuff that they add, it is about the Marathon Battle.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I'll have to see that one.
Yeah, so for that student that asks, I guess it depends on which of the two movies you're focusing on.
I don't have any sample papers, unfortunately, for the research proposal. But you have you have fairly detailed instructions in terms of what the major components are, and it's relatively short, and you'll get some good feedback before your final draft. As a Costco employee, I feel betrayed. It is not a Kirkland signature drink today. Yeah, so what ended up happening, don't get me wrong, I bought these at Costco. So I'm not totally betraying you. But I think I just wanted to try some new flavors or something. Anyway, let's get back to our story over here. And let's see what happens when war really kicks off. So by the end of the 480s, kind of Athens and the Greeks, they know that war is coming. Xerxes has changed his mind. He started to raise an army. And they kind of know that war is on the horizon. And you got to remember, right, that Persia is this big empire, and Athens is, the Greeks are a collection of independent city-states. So it's much harder for them to gather together to kind of unite against a single enemy here. And it's just shortly after that, just shortly after 483, that the Athenians had one of the luckiest things ever happen to them. So there are different mines, like mineral mines around the Attica Peninsula. And down in the southern part of it, they have a huge silver strike, right? Like just a bonanza of silver. And so it's like the amount of wealth in the city doubles overnight. And people debate, right? They're debating, what should we do with all this money? And one of the popular suggestions is let's split it up, right? Let's kind of, each citizen gets an equal amount. That sounds very good. And it's this general Themistocles who convinces everybody not to just split up the money and each take their share, but rather to put the entire thing towards a naval fleet. And he eventually gets everybody on board, and they're able to use all this silver to double or triple the size of the Athenian fleet. And we'll see that ends up being really, really important later on. So this makes Athens the new naval power, right? So they end up with hundreds of ships. And what we're looking at when we're looking at these ships, these are known as triremes, right? And so what that means is that there are actually 3 rows of oars over here, which allows them to make progress even when the winds aren't necessarily going the direction that they want them to go. And then the other thing to note is this thing on the front here. This is known as the rostrum, or the beak of the ship. And, ancient ships, they don't have cannons or anything like that. And so the way that you engage in naval warfare is ideally you're able to pull up and broadside another ship, right? So if another ship is coming along like this, you take yours with the rostrum and hit it right in the side. And you use this thing to basically poke a hole in the other side of the ship, and hopefully that makes the ship sink. So that's how warfare is happening, and the Athenians have just built a bunch of these. Now, Persia, on the other hand, they're bringing the largest army the world has ever seen. So Herodotus says 5 million Persians, which is a ludicrous number. No real historian thinks that that's actually the number that they had, but they do think it would have been something in the hundreds of thousands, maybe something around 500,000. And that's still the biggest army the world has ever seen. And it's actually so big that one of the problems is feeding everybody. So even if they take over the little cities and towns as they march, kind of north across Thrace and then down into Greece, still not enough food. So they need the fleet, they need the ships to travel beside them and help supply them with food. So the Greeks start trying to mount a resistance. Sparta calls for resistance, and they seek help from hundreds of city-states, and only 31 answer the call. So it's Sparta and 31 other city-states at the beginning, and the question now is where to mount the resistance. That's what that says behind me. Where do you mount the resistance? And there are a couple options here, right? You've got the Persian army. They're coming kind of north through there and then down south. One option is the Vale of Tempe, right? Tempe, Arizona, named after this. And that is not quite ideal because there are other ways around the pass there. Option number 2 is Thermopylae, right? The Hot Gates. That's where like the Battle of 300 actually takes place. And that's useful because it's really, really narrow and they can force the numbers down into a narrow pass. And option 3 is the Isthmus of Corinth, right? So right down here, and that has the benefit of also being very, very narrow. But the problem is if you mount your resistance there, you have to basically give up Athens, right? If you're moving all your army out down to the Isthmus of Corinth, Athens is just going to be free to burn. So what they choose option number 2, right? They choose Thermopylae, and that's where they're going to mount their resistance. Now, before we get to actual Thermopylae, we get the Battle of Artemisian in 480. Can I get out of the way for that? It says 480 behind me. All right. Maybe what I'll do is there we go. Okay. So, Artemisian is the straits up here, right? See this little narrow area? And it's a naval battle to begin with. And so what we get is we get the Persian fleet coming in from the east. And luckily, we get a storm. Takes out a third of the Persian fleet. And then we get another storm. And it takes out another third of the Persian fleet. And then the Athenian fleet finally shows up. And they're able to basically fight to a draw. Like a lot of the Athenian ships are lost, but most of the Persian ships are lost as well. So Artemisian, they're not quite able to get a full-fledged winner out of that. Now on land, the battle's going to take place at Thermopylae, which translates very literally as the Hot Gates. The Spartans there, right, the 300 Spartans are going to go up against 500,000 Persians. And the Persians just expect them to run away, right? And you guys have heard the story, right? The Spartans are not running anywhere. They're basically going out every day and doing things like combing their hair in the sun, right? Waiting for the Persian attack to happen. And the famous phrase, right, is that the Persians say that their arrows are going to block out the sun. And the Greeks, or the Spartans are like, that's fantastic. Then we'll get to fight in the shade. And for day after day after day, the Spartans are able to hold off the Persian invasion. And as the story goes, it's only a traitor from the Spartans who tells the Persians about this pass up through the mountains that allows the Persians to kind of sneak through there at night, and then they've got the Greeks trapped on both sides. And once the Greeks are trapped on both sides, they can no longer put up the kind of phalanx style of defense against the Persians. And to a man, each one of them is killed. And it's said that they fought with their kind of phalanx style at first, and then it was their swords, and then it was their hands, and then it was their teeth. And eventually King Leonidas, the leader of the Persians, is killed through archers' arrows. So it's one of these famous stories of putting up a major resistance, but the Persians win in the end, right? The Greeks do not win this battle. And as a result, the Persians continue their march, and they go and burn the city of Athens. So in 480, all of Athens is burnt to the ground. And it turns out that like a little bit later, this is actually kind of cool because they get an entirely new building program on the Acropolis, and that's where the Parthenon actually comes from, in the aftermath of this burning. Now, what they got to decide is basically what to do, right? They got to decide whether to put up a fight there, retreat back to the Isthmus of Corinth. That's what they end up doing. And that's where they're going to make their stance, and that's why Athens ends up burning. Now they got to decide whether to fight or not, right? Whether to keep fighting. And Themistocles, the guy who convinced them to build that giant fleet, says, let's keep fighting. Don't get your heads down. Let's see if we can turn this into a naval battle. And he remembers the story of the traitor at Thermopylae. And he sends another traitor over to the Persians, but this time the guy's really on the side of the Greeks. But he tells this story, right? And the story is essentially, the Greeks are broken. All it's going to take is one more battle. You beat them one more time and you don't have just Athens or just Attica or just Thermopylae. You have got all of Greece, right? The Greeks are arguing with each other. They're fragmentary. Now's the time to strike. And so the Persians have come through Thermopylae, right? They come and burned Athens. And the question from the Persian perspective is like, why would they want to fight anymore? Right? They can go wherever they want, right? The Greeks are only defending this little isthmus right here at Corinth. Persians can go anywhere. But this traitor gets in there and says the Greeks are almost broken. And the Persians, Xerxes wants to strike the final blow. So the Greeks have retreated. And they've retreated towards the Straits of Salamis. So we can see that kind of right here, right? The Greeks are retreating, and their fleet is hiding behind this little island over here. So what we can see is that the Greeks in blue here, all right, are hiding behind the island. They can't be seen. And they are able to send a couple ships out and then sucker the Persians in, the Persian fleet, into that area. And then what happens then is, the Greeks just annihilate them when it comes to naval battle. All you need to do is look at a map of, I wish I had a better map right there, of Greece, right? All it is coastline and peninsulas and islands. The Greeks are seafarers. When you look at the Persian Empire, right, it's got some coastline, but 99.9% of Persia is inland empire. They just don't have the same skills that the Greeks do at naval battle. And so at the Battle of Salamis, that's that little island there, the Greeks are able to destroy the Persians in 480, sink something like 200 Persian ships, and most importantly, break up the supply lines that were feeding the Persian troops. So this is the turning point for the Greeks, the Battle of Salamis. The Persians had no reason they had to fight this, but they do anyway because they want to strike the final blow. The Greeks are able to defeat them. Now, the battle's won, the war's not over yet. The next year, the Persians have one more battle in Greece at the Battle of Platia. It's the largest land Greek army Greece has ever seen. And they're able to defeat the Persians on land there. And then the following year, right, here's Platia. The following year, they have the final battle against the Persians at Mycale. They're able to defeat the Persians again there. And now the Greeks have won at Salamis. And they've won on land at Platia. And then they've won in Ionia at Mycale. And they've soundly beaten Persia 3 times in a row. And so this brings us to the end of the Persian Wars, at least for now. All right, here's what I'd like you to do. For Friday, finish your research draft proposals, right? We've finished our story of the Persian Wars for now. And Friday, I will email out an announcement as well. But Friday, go ahead. You've been working really hard on the research proposals. Take the day off from a synchronous class. I'm going to be posting a link to the movie 300 so you can watch a cinematographic, right, take on the Battle of Thermopylae. So watch that Friday during class or sometime this weekend. You don't have to show up here. I'm going to go ahead and give everybody attendance credit, and I will see you back here on Monday. All right, have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful Friday, and I will see you back here on Monday. All right, bye, everyone.